Parashat Bo, Israel is days before the final release from Egypt, and Moses is about to address them after 110 years of oppression, enslavement, and an act of slow genocide and killing the Israelite kids, and crushing Israel's spirit. Now, after all the signs and miracles, Israel brought the greatest empire, ancient world, to its knees, and they're about to go free. But Moses, instead of talking about freedom, or the land they're going to go to, or their next journey, their next steps, what's going to happen, instead he does something remarkable. He doesn't talk about all that. Instead, he uses that time to talk about the future, to talk about education, and the duty of the parents to teach their children. We see 3 of the 4 passages of the questions of the kids of the Haggadah that they ask: the wise one, the rebellious one, the wicked one, and the one who does not know how to ask. And thus the sages understood that it's a task of the father to hear his children's questions and encourage them to ask questions. And if they don't know how to ask questions, ask the question yourselves and help them ask questions and teach them to ask questions and give them answers. And this is not natural at all. To the contrary, this goes against history. It is no saying that children should be seen, not heard. This is a tragedy. And the same thing we see in Athens, in ancient Greece, where Socrates, who was a person who was known for going around and asking questions and teaching people to ask questions, was condemned by the citizens of Athens of corrupting the youth. But in Judaism, it is the contrary. Children are to be encouraged to ask questions. It is a parent's duty, in fact, to teach the children to ask questions, because that's how they grow. In fact, in Judaism, the faith is based in asking questions. Abraham asked God, "Shall the judge of all earth not do justice?" Moses asked God, "Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people?" And Jeremiah asked, "Why do the wicked prosper? And why do the faithless live at ease?" The whole book of Job is constructed on these fundamental questions. And in fact, God responds with even more and deeper questions. Judaism is not a religion of obedience. In fact, there is no word for obedience. Even though we have 613 commandments, we don't have a word for obedience. In fact, when modern Israel, when we had to reconstruct our language, we had to borrow the word letzayet from Aramaic, because Hebrew does not have such word. We have lishma, shma, which doesn't mean to obey. In fact, it means to hear, understand, internalize, and then respond. It is a dynamic action, not just to obey. It is built into the Hebrew consciousness. The highest duty is to seek to understand God, not simply obey Him. Israel, about to gain their freedom, were told to become a nation of educators. Because Torah's teaching, freedom is not won on the battlefield, on the political arena, or on court. It is won in schools, in human imagination and will. To defend a country, you need an army. To defend a society, you need schools, you need families, you need educational systems that its ideals are passed on from generation to generation, never lost, and clear where they come from and where they're going and what they stand for. Their ideals are never lost, never obfuscated, and never disappear. And thus Jews became the people whose fortresses are schools, whose heroes are teachers, and whose passion was education. The result was, the first century, Jews have created the first school, the first universal compulsory education, where children at the age of 6 or 7 had a structured education system. England, or the United States, did not have compulsory universal education until the 19th century. But here we are in the first century, and Jews already had universal compulsory education. As Maimonides, in his Code of Law, says, if a city has made no provision for education of the young, its inhabitants are placed under a ban until teachers have been engaged. If they persistently neglect this duty, the city is excommunicated, for the world only survives by the merit of the breath of the school children. It is fundamental. It is not because of the Constitution that we have freedom, but because of the values that we each uphold. As the American Justice, Judge Hand, puts it, the liberty lies in the hearts of the men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. And that's why Jews put education first. That's why when other nations created pyramids and towers and impressive pantheons and all these buildings, we created houses of study, we created synagogues, we created places where people can study from each other and learn and educate each other. We take pride in mental agility, in debate, in arguments, in seeing the other side of the disagreement and the intellect and understanding and learning. And this is why we're overrepresented in scholarship. Jews have always been among the sharpest minds in the world and overrepresented there. We have been literate for almost all Jewish history, and we took pride in that, in teaching our kids to read and write. We believe intelligence is God's greatest gift to humanity. And not only do we see wisdom in our tradition, well, we also bless other nations' great scholars. We admire the others. As historian Paul Johnson writes, an ancient and highly efficient social machine for production of intellectuals. Most of that had to do, and it has to do, with the absolute priority Jews have always placed on education. Schools, the Bet Midrash, religious study, has been seen as the highest religious duty, and teaching the highest vocation. But not in an authoritarian way, always made by encouraging the children to ask questions, not by imposing anything from above, but by hearing them out, hearing their problems or questions, and interacting with them in a loving way. As we'll see in the Parashat of Shema, we first have to love God with everything we have, and then we teach our children. Because only when you love something, that's when you teach it. That's when you can pass on that love. Not by hatred and fear and authoritarianism, but by love and teaching and hearing your children. That is liberty, not just of the body, but of the mind. But it's also important to teach that not every question has an immediate answer. Some take time to understand and may be understood through age or experience or great intellectual preparation. Yet others are beyond our collective comprehension at this state. Darwin never knew what a gene was. The only way to change the world is by education. You have to teach children the importance of righteousness, of justice, of compassion. You have to teach that freedom is only sustained by laws and habits of self-restraint. You have to constantly remind your children, your family, your kids of history, of our lessons of history. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, oppressed, because those who forget the bitterness of slavery eventually lose their commitment and courage to fight for freedom, and empower our children to ask, to argue, to challenge, and share the value and history of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.